Hello, greetings. Welcome to the National Resource Center, Mass Communication and Journalism Department of Tezpur University in Assam. I am Sisir Basu from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. Today, we are going to talk about the tradition of communication research, the kind of research that we conduct, what is the genesis or what happened that we have gone to the path that we are treading now. And we would like to be a little historical because history gives us a kind of shelter, it gives us identity and it gives us the strength. And if we know history, if we know what has really happened, then we will be able to know how to move forward. It also gives us a kind of a frame to look into our problems and also refer to the problems that we are facing and find out solutions for that. It also tells the characteristics of the subject or of the discipline that we are studying. Now, in 1920s, again let us be historical, in 20s and 30s, media was thought to be very powerful. And in the beginning of the 20th century, media was supposed to be so powerful, it was given a title called it is a bullet. It was like a bullet, and that is how bullet theory came into being. It was also named as hypodermic needle theory. That means it works like an injection, and also of course for development communication it was thought to be a magic bullet. So, media was thought to be all powerful, and when this was going on, Elihu Katz and Paul Lazarsfeld, they had some doubt. They wanted to find out whether the media was that powerful or not. And so, they conducted studies, and it was funded by Bureau of Applied Research. Shortly it is known as BASR in short, and they also conducted another study called voting. The title of that study was voting. It was on the American presidential election in 1948. So, these projects reports were put together and they analyzed, and they found that the power of media was tempered, was lessened by many variables that were in between the media and the receiver or the audience. And they dug in further, and they came up with a book called The Personal Influence. Now, this report said that media was not that powerful, and there were many other reports that they pointed that there were many personal decisions that came into play. If we see this Paul Lazarsfeld and his life, he was a mathematician, he was in Vienna, he was a Jew, and he liked empirical studies. And because of his backdrop, because of his background, he was unable to get a position in the area of his study in Vienna, because there was someone, a professor called Professor Othman Span, and the famous Span Circle. He did not like the way Paul Lazarsfeld conducted his studies and his academic endeavors. So, he somehow denied him the position. It was another professor, Paul Buller, who was helping him, and he helped him to get the Rockefeller Foundation Fellowship, so that he could go to America and do some studies there and also conduct studies. In America, in Princeton University, he found Henry Cantrill. Henry Cantrill was a BASR person, Bureau of Social Research, and this man helped him to go to Columbia University from Princeton University. So, you can see that personal decisions were the key for conducting study. In the beginning, as I was saying, that it was a very powerful media, and to investigate that powerful media, he was helped by people who were around, and BASR funded his studies. In his personal life also, he was helped by people. So, what sort of studies to be done, what should be the theme, how things are to be done depends on people who are at the helm of the affair. That means their personal decision, their liking and disliking can make and unmake people, researcher, and also the trend or the school, how it will be moving forward would depend on these people who are decision makers. In his case, in Paul Lazarsfeld personal case, his life was was changed because Professor Span refused him to give a kind of position in Vienna University, but Karl Buller helped him, Handley Cantrill helped him, took him from Princeton University to Columbia University. And if we see his life a little further, we will see that what he was doing in radio and was successful because of personal decision of some people who are at the helm of the affair, he lost out because of the personal influence also. Say for instance, when television was growing in the late 40s and early 50s, Ford Foundation approached him and said that you conduct similar studies as you have conducted for radio in the case of television. And he agreed to do that one, but at that time the whole America was suffering from the fear of communism. Senator Paul McCarthy, he was particularly instrumental in witch hunting. He was anything that would be related to social science, anything that would be related to some humanistic study, he would go after that. And in this case, Ford Foundation, which agreed to fund Lazarsfeld to conduct research on the television and its impact, could not do, because he had to withdraw, and there were two commissions, Cox Commission and Recce Commission in 1952. They have implicated Ford Foundation, saying that they were something that was, they were doing something, or Ford Foundation was doing something that was not desirable, that would go against the interest of America and was aligning more with the socialist and communist. So therefore, he lost out, he could not carry out the kind of studies that he wanted to conduct in the area of television. So personal influence matters. Rockefeller Foundation at that time, we know that was supported by even President Roosevelt. So the powers that be, when they are behind a certain project, or when they decide that certain studies are to be done and certain studies are not to be done, those things remain. So at the end of the day, it is personal influence that matters. Therefore, personal disliking, personal liking, political ecology, and the kind of support one receives would decide on the matter of research. Now, if we move on to Cold Era, the psychological war, which was based on communication, communication was the key, propaganda was the core of the fight of the war, propaganda war, and you have seen that in both the cases a lot of studies were done as to what communication from both sides were doing for the audience and for the people. Now, spurt of technologies also came into being, because if you want to win the war, you need to have sophisticated technology, for which both USA and USSR were putting a lot of budget. When the new technologies were coming in, old technologies were thrown out. They were actually given to the civil authorities to apply to meet the civil problems, to solve the problems of the civil society. Now, studies in large number were conducted in this area, whether these technologies which were being applied to solve the problems of the civilians were actually working, or whether they were yielding the results or not. And they, over a period of time, they formed the outcomes of those research, formed the meat of our discipline, the literature that we study today in universities and in courses. But what we have found out, as in the beginning, as I was saying, the kind of research that we are conducting, that direction remained the same from bullet theory onwards to personal influence. That remained. We sort of studied one type of research. Models and theories came up from that, but the paradigm, that is the effect theory, did not change. I was telling you in another lecture that we all had a kind of unidirectional mode. That means there was a strong center, from center communication messages were being given out, and that would reach the audience. Of course, the perspectives would be differing, the way of looking at communication would differ, but the paradigm remained the same, that is the effect paradigm. From there, if we jump to now Frankfurt School, it was a kind of different strand, a different kind of studies. This was more of criticizing of the effect theory, the effect type of research that we were conducting. Horkheimer worked on positivism, focusing on the inadequacies of administrative research. After that, when they went to America, the Frankfurt School scholars, Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno worked on cultural industry, looking into the ownership pattern, looking into the kind of programs that they were giving out, talking about the powers that be, giving their ideas for the general public to consume. And there was they analyzed, and then they found out that all these programs that were on media were more or less like a commodity. So, a commodification of television program, radio program, the concept of massification, standardization of the audience, all these things came into being after their studies. Walter Benjamin, also another Frankfurt School scholar, he studied theatre, film and radio, but from a different perspective. We have Habermas, who talked about public sphere, and we have a new perspective of that. But by and large, that tradition of doing effect research continued and was very strong, because the American influence on communication study was very strong. Then we see that the Center of Contemporary Cultural Studies came at Birmingham, and Stuart Hall and Richard Hogarth, they were focusing on the youth culture, mass and popular culture, film and television. The research and the publication that they conducted were collaborative in nature. It was not one man show, but senior scholar together with other young research scholars were conducting many studies on culture. So, we have seen that though there were pockets of newness in the kind of study that we conduct in communication, like the Frankfurt School has done, and the Center for Cultural Studies at Birmingham School has done. But by and large, the strong effect of the American school remained. Now, I would like to talk about the conformity. There is a word called conformity. That means whatever the powers that we would like to do, would like to like us to conduct, we would conduct. Say for instance, there was this conformity is an important aspect in our life, in our family life, in our social life, and also in the workplace where we deal with others and the people who are on power and supervisory level. Now, we have two kinds of conformity that have been given to us. One was by Katz and Lazarsfeld. in their personal influence, they talked about conformity as to how to conform and take culture of doing research forward. And another conformity, the concept of conformity, we get from David Reisman in his book called The Lonely Crowd. Now, David Reisman you must be familiar with if you have read Development Communication and Daniel Lerner's Passing of the Traditional Society. He was the one who wrote the introduction of that book, and David Reisman has written the book called The Lonely Crowd. Both of these group, that means the Katz and Lazarsfeld idea of conformity, is diametrically opposite to the conformity concept that David Reisman has given. If we read the conformity, the conception, the way Elihu Katz and Paul Lazarsfeld have given us, they talk that conformity would always insulate the citizens or the audience from propaganda or of the powerful media. They said that it helps the audience to rediscover the primary groups and the members to which they belong. So, the audience would come to know who their associates are, where they should be together and with whom they should be conforming. It also tells us the personal networking is very important to bring meaning in our life and to proceed with the work in life. The members of the primary groups do not like any member to leave the group. That is what Elihu Katz and what Paul Lazarsfeld have said, that the primary group to which a researcher belongs or to an audience member belongs, they wouldn't like them to leave the group. They would like the group to be together and conform to the rules and regulations and the norms of that group. They should not be thinking differently. If they think, then they should keep that thinking within the group. Members would like to see that each member of the group succeeds and preserves the core value of the culture that they have in the group. Now, there should not be any one who would be protesting. There should be a lot of conforming and consensus among themselves. Now, opposite to this, that means the two persons, that is Elihu Katz and Paul Lazarsfeld, said that we must give up our own personal opinion and conform to the opinion of the people or of the powers that be within the group. That means group members should stay together. Whereas David Reisman in his book The Lonely Crowd talks opposite. He says that there are three important types of conformity. What are those? He said that we are born into a tradition, and therefore when we are born into a tradition, there are many things that are given to us without us knowing or asking, and we follow that tradition. We conform to that so that we can have some sort of a peaceful, a smooth social life. That is what the tradition says us. Tradition would give us certain norms. The other one is the inner self. That is, every individual, we get our values, how to conduct ourselves from the family, and the family will tell us what to do and what not to do. And the primary group, that means family members and closely associated, the outer circle of the family, they would tell us as to how to behave, how to conduct ourselves. And the third one is the other, that is the peer group, that they would be telling us as to how to be in a society and how to conduct ourselves. So, we get conformity, the concept of conformity and the norms from three sides. One is the tradition gives us because we are born into it, the family gives us because the family and the close members of the family we are getting associated with from the time we are born. And the third one is the others, usually by peer group, our friend circle, our classmates, our people in the office, they are the peer group, and then they help us as to how to move forward. Reisman, in his book, The Lonely Crowd, speaks, and I quote him, human beings deep in their hearts recognize the individualities and the uniqueness and count this as blessing. That means he is saying that every human being, though we are born into a tradition, we have certain uniqueness in us and certain individualities in us. He is not tempted and coerced into adjustment. Nobody tells us that we should be adjusting to others. We should be tempering whatever our likes and dislikes are. The idea that men are created free and equal is both true and misleading. Because he says that that we are all free, we are born free, and we are all equal, and this is true. But at the same time he is saying that these are misleading. Misleading because men are created different, they lose their social freedom and their individual autonomy in seeking to become like each other. That means they would like to be like others, and this happens with all of us. We have certain models in front of us and we would like to follow them. We copy the work of the others, we copy the way others talk, we copy the mannerisms of others. It is there. Though we are born free, we realize that we have individual qualities, we realize that we have certain unique qualities. That uniqueness, though we recognize, but we would like to become like others. Search for truth and reality comes from thinking and doing things different as per the questions raised by free thinking. Since we are free, so we would search according to our own will, we will move forward. That creativity and free thinking is smothered. Now, as we move forward, this tradition, this conformity will smother that one, will push us to compromise, will push us to give up all these things, and the political and social norm set by the society will be taken up. Individuals find themselves in very awkward position when they try to follow their free thoughts, because they then will not be considered as someone in the society, because they will say that he is somewhat an antisocial or outside the social norm. So, in order to be someone, in order to be accepted in the society, what we do, instead of questioning, we conform. If we are said that this is the custom and we need to follow, we do follow, even if we have questions and we have valid questions. Now, we have to, if we do not conform, then we will be suffering from insecurity. Insecurity because then we will not be able to lean on others, and that is why we are forced to follow some people and their dictates who are in power. In case of research also, it is always that others would tell us what to work on or what to study and how to study that, and what sort of findings we should be putting in our research studies, because they are the funding agency, and many times they are the people who decide which research projects are to be approved and which research projects are to be eliminated or disapproved. Eric Fromm, another person who is from critical school, said beautifully that virtue of any society is to be adjusted. That means you are able to adjust with the other people and norms of the others, and be like the rest. That means you be one of the crowd. But vice, the opposite of virtue, is to be different. That means, if you are different than the others, you will be known as a vice. Now, if we see that what happened in the beginning with Lazarsfeld started very nicely. He questioned the bullet theory. He tried to find out an answer because he was not convinced that media was that powerful, and that is why he started to question that one and came up with a various study sponsored by BASR, and then he found that personal influence was the key for our decision making. And unfortunately, Lazarsfeld way of conformity, particularly for personal influence, was not followed. It is unfortunate that we have followed the kind of research that he did, and we thought that that is the only way. We conformed to Lazarsfeld instead of following his ethos, instead of following how he questioned. And David Reisman's way of conformity, that means to be different, was never followed. This conformity has limited our communication research, because we were following the tradition of quantifying the symptoms, that is effect research. That is what was set forth by Lazarsfeld and Elihu Katz, and we never focused on the cause of whatever the symptoms were for. So, we needed to dig in, we needed to question the symptoms and find out the reason as to why the symptoms were occurring, which he himself did, but we did not follow him. This tradition could not get deeper. The tradition that we follow in communication research, mostly quantitative method, mostly administrative type of research that we do, we have not gone deeper and searched for truth and reality. It has been conforming to the norms of agencies and the policy makers. The policy makers, if they dictate to us either directly or indirectly that we needed to toe down certain lines, we would follow that one in order to get the funding or in order to get the reward. The liberation and creativity lies in thinking differently and, shall we say, subversively. So, in our own thinking, we needed to think differently. Unless and until we think differently, we will not be able to question and get ourselves empowered. So, therefore, subversiveness in its positive sense will have to be adhered to. That means, if we have a question inside us, if we would like to question certain norms, certain way of doing things, we need to. If we do not, then knowledge will not be created, because we will be only supporting the symptoms, we only find out the effect of it, but we will never look into the cause of effect. And the tradition of communication research, starting from the very beginning, was this effect research, and we have not, even when it came to us, the cultural study tradition or Frankfurt School tradition, we did not take them very seriously, or we never liked them. And though we had questions, probably we never treaded that path. Maybe we all would like to conform as per the decision of communication research tradition in our country. Thank you very much.